everyone, and welcome to the 8th Annual UAGC Early Childhood Conference. We have Dr. Idris with us today, and I am super excited for you to hear her session. It's Teaching All Children, Teaching the Whole Child, and I want to give her a proper introduction really quickly. Dr. Idris currently resides in Prince George's County, Maryland, with her husband and 3 kiddos. She is typically consumed with teaching adult learners and helping her kids pursue their dreams. She earned her BS in Human Development Family Science from the University of Maryland, College Park, and a Master of Science in Education from Johns Hopkins University. Through a highly competitive selection process, she started her career in education as a Teach for America Corps member in Washington, D.C. She taught math and science in urban schools for the 4th to 8th graders during her time as a K-12 teacher. She also served as a math inclusion teacher, instructional coach in various school leadership roles, and assisted in the development of the math department at a newly opened middle school. She also taught courses to teachers in preparation for renewing or obtaining their teacher certificate. She has done so many amazing things. I have had the opportunity to work with her, and I am super excited for you to hear her speak. All right, on this slide, we kindly request your attention for a brief moment. In the spirit of transparency and utmost respect for our community, we have some information we'd like you to read on this slide, and by taking a few moments to read this information, you empower yourself with important things that are going to regard the boundaries of our knowledge-sharing environment. On this next slide, we would like you just to take a moment also to read through this, and then we're going to embark on some exciting information that Dr. Idris is going to share with us. So, Rhonda, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shipley. My name is Dr. Idris, and today I'll be talking about teaching the whole child. On our agenda, you'll be able to see that our session is broken out into what, why, how, and so what. We're going to be talking about whole child approach. We're going to talk about why that's important for students with special needs, how we can provide some strategies for teaching the whole child, and next steps. How can we apply those strategies? First, a little introduction about myself. I love Bitmojis, which are almost cartoon images that represent yourself, easy to build out in an app. And I love using this because the littles get to see me in a cartoon character, but also this helps with virtual learning and being able to use animations and insert myself into virtual spaces for kids and adults to be able to see me in a new way. So a Bitmoji about me is that I wear multiple hats daily. I'm a wife. I've been married for 10 years, and I'm also a mom of 3.75 kids. I'm about to have a baby, my 4th baby, next month. I'm also an educator. I've been an educator for about 10 years as well, and all things education for my degrees, because I just love seeing kids learn new things and learn things in a new way, and it excites me so much. So I will definitely be continuing in education for the foreseeable future. And the what? This is what we're doing today. Our objective is that by the end of the session, participants will be able to first define the whole child approach. How does that connect to early childhood alignment or early childhood education alignment? Is by being able to define the whole child approach, we can support the growth and learning of students with special needs in early childhood education. Also, by the end of the session, hopefully we can analyze the importance of taking a holistic approach to teaching and supporting children with diverse abilities. And this can help us support and consider various aspects of a child's development, including their physical, cognitive, emotional, social, and behavioral domains. Next, we'd be able to evaluate some strategies for whole child practices in order to effectively teach students with special needs. This will still support and consider their various aspects of their developmental domains. And also, this would also support this understanding that all children, no matter their abilities, deserve high quality education to be prepared for what's next. And what's next could be the next grade level, the next career choice, or the next opportunity to go to college, as close or far away as it might be, our goal as ECE professionals is to help prepare our kids for whatever is next. Lastly, develop some type of action plan for creating inclusive and supportive learning environments. Once again, this will also be important to help our kids and support this concept for ECE professionals that all children deserve high quality education to be prepared for what's next. Let's talk about the what, which is whole child approach. Let's understand the whole child approach and explore what we are learning about. Let's first talk about the definition of whole child education according to Byrd, the comprehensive development of every aspect of a child's being, including their physical, cognitive, emotional, social, and language domains. We can see how important considering the child's developmental needs are here in whole child education. On the screen below that is an image of Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory, where the child is at the center. And we need to consider the context of the child, their microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macrosystem, chronosystem. We're thinking about all the different things that influence the development of a child, all the different people, systems that children experience and are exposed to that impact how they develop, the skills they bring to us into our classrooms, and the context from which they bring those things. These considerations are essential or significant for early childhood education because it helps to promote foundational development. It helps to help our kids prepare for learning. It also helps us analyze our students' readiness for learning, understanding the context of our children in our classrooms help us prepare for inclusive practices so that all kids are able to access a high quality education, are able to access curriculum, are able to access and participate in all activities, are able to gain the same quality of educational experiences regardless of their ability. It also helps to promote resilience, perseverance, and well-being, and this sense of belonging, which there are strong arguments and research out there about the connection between sense of belonging and your capacity to learn, ability. Everyone has the capacity to learn, but feeling like you belong somewhere helps you to feel an inclination to engage in that learning, to engage in that community. So that sense of belonging is super important. Also, long-term outcomes. Early childhood education is so important because we're talking about our early readers, early writers, how students feel about school, how students feel about learning. We're building some foundations here for where our students might end up in the future. Also, equity and justice. This could be an equalizer for students if we take on a whole child approach, because while they might not be able to access certain activities if done in one way, should we provide them with multiple approaches, you're equalizing the opportunity for kids to be successful. Everyone gets that chance. And then how is whole child different from traditional teaching? So on the right, we see that whole child versus traditional teaching. We can say rather than focusing solely on academic achievement or isolated skill development, this approach recognizes that children's learning and growth are interconnected and multifaceted. What we're trying to say here is that traditionally in teaching, we think about how many scores or points a student might need to get on a test or an assignment. That's the focus. How much have you achieved? Or the focus could be on isolated skill development, where I separate the context of a child, the background of a child, what the child brings to me in my classroom from the fact that they need to learn to read this many words per minute, from the fact that they need to learn their numbers, their letters, they need to be able to combine and separate. Those are focusing on just the skills. But how can I use their context, what they have experienced in life thus far, what their home life is like, what the experience is like living in my community, in my state, or my area. How does that influence what background knowledge my students are bringing to me? All of those things are interconnected, multifaceted. And so a student who is from a home where baseball is talked about a lot might be able to comprehend text about baseball much better than a reader who has never heard of baseball before. So thinking about the experience of students is super important when we're designing educational experiences. And below that is an image where the student is at the center, healthy development, learning, and thriving. Think about how positive relationships and having an environment that is safe and feel like they belong there, rich learning experiences, how them getting the ability to develop their skills, their habits, and strong growth mindset, and how integrating support systems, all of those things surrounding the whole child can be transformative if it's personalized for them, thinking about each individual child's context, how this can empower the child, how this can be culturally affirming, where I feel like I don't have to strip my culture to enter this room. This is whole child education or whole child approach. Now, why is this important? Well, back to Bronfen's-Benner's ecological theory, we need to think about the various contexts of a child because the needs of that child is also influenced by their context. Think about how you can adapt your learning experiences or your learning environment to meet the needs of all the various abilities in the room. So let's start with the classroom environment. Think of how kids would engage in the classroom, interact with materials. How are they able to interact with things that they see, touch, in the room, smell? We're also thinking about visually. We're also thinking about sensory here. Think about the classroom environment as their community at school. Think about individualized support that students might need, and also bringing in the family. Family involvement is essential because that's a huge part of what makes a student's value system, what determines their likes, dislikes, things that are a part of their background knowledge. So having that family involvement is important, but also to have an advocate, to building support, because having that alignment between home and school will definitely improve the educational experience overall for our kiddos. And for mesosystem, think about collaborating with other professionals. We can't think and perform in isolation. Collaboration is essential. And then also tapping into community resources. What does my community provide to help students with various abilities? And then think about your exosystem. Think about your school policies, your district policies, how that might influence or affect your individual students. Think about state or local legislation. How would that influence how your students, what resources your students are able to access, or influence what you are able to do for your students to provide access? Also consider school climate. No, I'm not talking about the weather here. I'm talking about the social, emotional, and values that are an essential part of your school makeup. You're thinking about the things that are of importance. For example, when we talk about high school, right? My high school was a crazy football high school. So the school climate was football centered at my school. So football was life. We eat, breathe, sleep, football. Think about your school climate. What's important to your school? How can I ensure that all my kiddos can gain access to those things that are important? How can I ensure that the things that are important aren't barriers for my students? And then for the macro system, we're thinking about, we're kind of zooming out. We're thinking about social attitudes and beliefs. What are the social attitudes and beliefs about what students are able to do or expected to do? And then how can we inform people that might be misinformed about what students should be able to do or capable of doing? This might include sometimes going back and informing parents that, yes, your child can learn to draw a face, even though they struggle with fine motor skills. This is how we can break down this skill, and this is how we could do it over this amount of time, this time frame. But sometimes we have to get other people on board and educate them in order to have a shift in negative social attitudes and beliefs, but there are also some positive social attitudes and beliefs. And we want to tap into those to get support and maximize support for our kids. Also think about the opportunities that might be out there for our kiddos and their families, and think about how we can maximize those to support them. And then lastly, Chronos system, think about the historical context of your students, of their background. Also think about the age we're in, right? We're in the digital age. How can I leverage technology and the fact that students are digital natives in order to support their diverse needs and abilities? How can I gain an understanding of life transitions? How can I think about all of the experiences developmentally that a child would have had all the way up until now and consider that in how I design educational experiences for them? A little bit more about the why. It's important that we think about whole child education because, well, let's explore the complex and inclusive needs of students based on the domains of child development. Physically, students might experience needs with mobility, fine and gross motor skills, sensory needs. They might experience other health conditions, which might put us in a place where we need to adapt what we do to provide the need for these students. Then there might be cognitive needs. There are students with learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities, and also need support with executive functioning skills. There's also students that might need social support. There might be students that need additional support with developing healthy peer relationships, and we have to model that for them. There might be students that struggle with communication and how to interact with others. We might very well have to provide support with things like two-way communication or how to share our materials when we do an activity. Also think of emotional support due to various reasons, which could be medical or due to past experience. Students could experience anxiety and depression even at a young age. And also think about trauma. Maybe a student have experienced loss or have been in a terrible car accident, or they could have traumatic experiences, or they could be a product of the state and they need additional support because they have stressors that we might not think about. So we have to support those emotional needs. And then, of course, language. There are students with speech and language disorders, or they might be language delayed, or although English language learners are not students with a developmental need because they have a language. It's in another language that is not English, which means that we need to provide that support so that they too can access the curriculum. And that may look very varied based on the language that is spoken at home, but these are students that should always be considered as well because they also deserve high quality education and access to high quality educational experiences. Let's talk some strategies for teaching the whole child and why it's important. One, recognize diverse learning styles. Every child learns in a unique way. Now, there are research out there to categorize or try to condense the way students learn into these neat categories, but it may not always work out that way because I might like to learn about history by talking about it and hearing it from others, but I might really hate reading it. But I love reading science journals. It gets me so excited. So really, honestly, learning styles can vary based on even the content that a student is learning. So really to recognize diverse learning styles, it's important to get to know your students, get to know your kiddos in the classroom and know what their interests are. And you can start that by day one. You can even start that before they show up to your room. If you communicate with parents, get an opportunity to do home visits, various strategies out there. That way you can tailor lessons to allow students to explore their challenges, their strengths, and their preferences. The second way we could attack teaching the whole child or use a strategy is to address varied abilities and needs. Students have a wide range of abilities, backgrounds, prior knowledge. How can we leverage what students already know in order to support their education or advance their education? If the majority of my class is interested in soccer, why can't I introduce books about soccer? Why can't I play a game about learning numbers that involves a soccer ball? Think about how you can use their background, what they already know to do, and what they already know about in order to differentiate or adapt your instruction to meet them exactly where they are. And then also fostering engagement and motivation is another strategy. So students are motivated and they feel more engaged when they're exploring things they're interested in. So identifying this goes back to getting to know your kids, identifying students' interests, essential for adapting or differentiating. When we promote student voice and choice, we elevate their voice to let them know that what you say, what you desire is important in this room. And then when we give them choices, let them feel like they have some type of autonomy and independence, we can cultivate a positive learning environment where it's student-centered. Now you are a facilitator of learning versus just a distributor of knowledge. The next approach is to promote equity and inclusion. So remember that all students, regardless of their background, abilities, or learning differences, should have equitable access to quality education and opportunities for success. When we keep that at the center, which is also why it's at the center of the screen, because we keep this at the center, it keeps us grounded. Having an understanding that not all of us show up in the room with the same amount of knowledge, with the same abilities, and with the same level of education, then we can really meet students where they are to build them up to where they need to be. So the intensity of support for students should look varied. And it's easier, so much easier to just make a one size fit all, but the reality is one size never fits all. Have you tried to get into a one size fits all pair of jeans? This is not traveling pants. It does not work, unfortunately, for everyone. So thinking about equity and inclusion, about everyone deserves to have equal access to high quality education can help us stay grounded in doing the work and the intellectual preparation for ourselves as early childhood educators to provide that support for our students. And then supporting social and emotional development. A lot of times, because we want to focus on the skills that students need to learn, we tend to take away the social and emotional needs and development that could aid, that very well does aid in the skill development, but also holistically in life, their ability to demonstrate growth, persistence, and perseverance in the future. They need those skills, those social emotional skills and regulation. So providing opportunities for collaboration, because let's think about it, not all things are done in isolation in the real world, or even when they go to upper elementary, middle school, high school, and college, collaboration is important. Also think about peer interaction. How do I interact with my peer? Provide those opportunities for students to interact with their peers when they're completing projects, assignments, or exploration activities. Also provide opportunities for reflection. Metacognition is important for our kiddos, and they can experience this at a young age. Think about, what did I do to get this outcome? What were the positives about what I did? And what would I do differently in the future? Should I do this? Should I get this opportunity again? so that I can do even better. Providing those opportunities for kids to reflect on what they've done will also help to foster a growth mindset and their overall holistic development. Next is empowering student agency and ownership. And I did mention voice and choice before, but let's think about when students have a voice, that means they are able to actually tell you what their interests are or tell you what they desire to do. And when they have a choice, if they have more than one option in their learning experiences, they become active participants in their education. They are taking ownership of their learning. They feel like they have a stake in this. They become more engaged or better equipped to be engaged, because this is not something that is just handed to me based off what my teacher likes or what my teacher knows or what the standard curriculum says I should do. It's because it's something that's presented to me that I like, I might be interested in, and I get a choice in what I want to do. It kind of beefs them up to have that agency, that pumps them up to want to actually participate. And then goal setting and progress monitoring, that also fosters autonomy, self-efficacy, and a growth mindset. So goal setting can be done at a younger age. Help a student understand that they can decide that I want to do this in this time frame. I want to get this done. And I can always check my progress on getting this done. And also, this helps them feel empowered to be able to do the thing. It helps them feel bringing that self-efficacy in. When people, based on self-efficacy and theory and research, when you feel confident in what you're doing, you're more likely to do it. If I feel more confident to lead project-based learning, guess what? I will implement project-based learning in my classroom because I feel confident about that, because I've done tons of professional development. I feel very knowledgeable about it. I feel very confident about it. So of course I'm going to implement PBL in my classroom. However, if I'm a teacher who is not that confident that I can really do it, I feel like, my God, that's a lot of moving around. I don't see how that's something that I could do. Then I'm less likely to implement something like project-based learning in my classroom. It's the same thing for our kiddos. If I feel confident in reading, I will read. If I feel confident that I can cut my paper in a straight line, I will try. But that also brings in growth mindset. If I feel confident that I can try, but I might mess up, I'm still willing to try because I know that I am learning. So bringing in that growth mindset is also important for increasing that engagement, because you want students to feel that mistakes are just a part of the learning process. It's better to try than to never try at all. And so those things pair very well together, self-efficacy and growth mindset. And then lastly, maximizing learning outcomes. When students progress at their own pace, they achieve deeper understanding and proficiency in academic skills and concepts. What we mean by their own pace, no, I'm not saying that we should totally ignore state standards, expected skills. No, that's not what we're doing. We're thinking that every student progresses differently towards standards, towards learning outcomes, towards learning objectives. Every student really does. And if we give students the tools to assess or understand the progress they're making, and we acknowledge that every student is doing it at a different pace, they can gain a much deeper understanding and a much more robust development of the skills and concepts that we want them to gain. Because students no longer feel left behind, they do not feel set apart from their peers. They understand that I am moving at my pace and I will get to that goal. I will get to that goal, but I might not be moving as fast as my peers. And personally, I do have a daughter who is currently a very strong reader. She reads like a fourth grader, but she just turned 6. And her comprehension is a little bit lower than that of a fourth grader. But for her peers, they might see her reading fluently. She's not even reading picture books anymore, right? They might think, oh my goodness, I should be able to do that. No, you're reading at your own pace based on what the standards say. We're going to push towards that goal, but you might not get there at the same time as everyone else. So educators can optimize learning outcomes for our kiddos and ensure that every child reaches their full potential if we actually progress monitor students at their own pace. So a little bit more about the how. How can we utilize these strategies, put them into practice for teaching the whole child? Well, whole child approaches to consider for all learners include some below on the screen. So individualized educational plans or IEPs or 504 plans, this is one way that we attempt to teach the whole child, because individualized education plans is based on that specific student needs. And now based on the jurisdiction you're in or the school district you're in, the actual process for developing an IEP or a 504 plan might look different. However, in this country, this is a beautiful thing because not all countries have this. So IEPs are a way to provide students with individualized support based and also include support based on the developmental needs. If we need occupational therapy, speech therapy, do you need time out of your class? Do you need push into your class support? Do you need social emotional support, counseling? These are all components that can be considered in an IEP. And then for a 504 plan, some additional supports. Oh, by the way, accommodation and modifications, of course, in an IEP. And then for your 504 plan, maybe a student, maybe the ability or disability doesn't affect how they advance in their academic experiences, but it might affect how they access learning experiences. Like maybe they need frequent breaks, or maybe maybe they have a medical condition and they need frequent bathroom breaks or different bathroom or toileting considerations. Maybe they need adaptations to their manipulatives, but they are currently quote unquote on grade level or at developmental expectations. Maybe they don't need an IEP, which more so involves more educational goals and objectives, and maybe they just need a 504 plan. So I would always recommend having a deep understanding or really good understanding of IEPs and 504 plans, because that's important even for us as early childhood educators. Also, professional development and training, taking the bull by the horn here. You are in charge of your professional development and training too. You have autonomy and agency to do so. Seek out whatever is out there. It could be a quick Google search, or it could be thinking about what your district, your center provides already, or reaching out to leadership for support in identifying those things. I need to know more about how I can meet the needs of various learners in my room. What can I do to learn some things? There are resources out there that are in a more webinar format, right? Or it could be a one-pager that you read to gain some understanding. It could even be going on YouTube, honestly. Or it could be attending a formal conference like this one, or it could be something like going back to school. But professional development and training is definitely going to be essential for teaching the whole child, because children's contexts are constantly changing and developing based on the time period we're in. If you've been in early childhood education for multiple decades, you already know that things change over time. Policies change over time, cultural context change over time. I mean, my 6-year-old's talking about Roblox, which is a video game. I had no idea what that was when I was in school. I didn't even have cell phones when I was in school. Matter of fact, Wi-Fi was not in existence when I was in school. So can you imagine how different life will be for our young children in another 10 years? So constant development for ourselves professionally, super important. Also think about differentiated instruction and accommodations. This might be outside of an IEP that we're talking about right here. Maybe you have to adapt what certain sheets, maybe you have to have different levels of text. Maybe you have to include more pictures for our English language learners or students that might not have enough language. Maybe you need more pictures. Maybe you need to do a picture exchange system if their language development is not where it should or is expected to be at this age. Also, think about positive teacher-student relationships. Leveraging the relationship we have with students, it can be essential for student engagement because when students feel connected to you in a positive way, they show up differently in the room. The way they adapt to your instruction or the way that they even manage their own behaviors can actually change based on the relationship they have with their teacher. And then positive behavioral incentive systems. This is tagged as PBIS, if you ever heard of this. This could be school-wide or this could be just in your classroom. But having an incentive system tied to positive behavior can definitely improve the engagement for education that students perform in. For example, I had an economy system in my classroom where kids got their own little bucks, and we called them at the time tiger bucks because our school mascot was a tiger. And our kids were able to earn money through tiger bucks, right? And we had a whole visual chart. How do I earn my bucks? I can do these different things. Like if I participate in my class job, if I'm the caboose or the line leader, different activities that they could participate in. Or if they gain points for something. I had a marble system in my classroom, and every time the whole class transitions to lunch or from outdoors in their hallway high five, as I would like to call it, where they're, like in a ordered manner, in their appropriate voice levels, then the class as a whole gets 2 marbles in a small jar. And if we fill up the marbles, then the whole class gets 10 tiger bucks. And then they get to spend their tiger bucks at the class store or the school store. This is just an example of a positive behavior incentive system. It's tied to positive behavior. It is not punitive behavior. It's not highlighting punitive behavior. So the focus is here. What good things, amazing things, collaborative things, positively impactful things can I do in order to gain an incentive versus if I don't do this, well, you're not going to get this. I'm going to take this from you, or we're going to call your parents. It's less focus on the punitive behaviors or sorry, approaches, and more focus on the positive things, reinforcing the positive behaviors we want students to see. And sometimes students might need additional positive behavior support, or they might need a behavioral plan. Now, this sometimes can be a part of an IEP, or it could be something that is separate and outside of an IEP, because an IEP is determined by whether or not something affects a student's access to education and learning. So maybe a student needs an individualized positive behavioral support because PBIS is not enough for them to modify or replicate or show positive behaviors in the time frame that we need them to in order to participate in educational experiences. And then cultural responsive teaching, or it could be called CRT, cultural responsive teaching, or culturally affirming teaching. A lot of different ways we can say this, but essentially we're thinking about the background, the culture, the various things that impact or develops or maybe not develop, but goes into someone's culture, what music they're interested in, if they're what state they're from, what community they're from, language they speak, types of movies, value system, religion. There are many things to consider for culture, and there are definitely multiple layers to culture. But thinking about the culture of your students And then responding to that culture in the way you teach them is important. Let's go back to the football example. If 33% of my students are from backgrounds and cultures that find football to be called soccer, or soccer to be called football, then that's something that I can explicitly say in my classroom. Because while I'm saying football, 33% of my kids think I'm talking about soccer, while the other rest of my kids think I'm talking about American football. So making that distinction for my kids is important so they can all know exactly what background information they're going to utilize when we're talking about football. So cultural responsive teaching is important, and that comes right back to knowing your kids, spending the time to get to know their families, their background, and their culture is important. So you can respond to that in how you adapt your teaching approaches to ensure that we're all on the same page, to ensure that there's some type of cultural continuity between their home and their school. They get to still feel that their culture matters, and they don't have to change their culture in order to take part in learning experiences. And then lastly, family and community partnerships are definitely going to be important. Some people would say the old saying, it takes a village to raise a child, but really it takes a community to educate a child. And we cannot educate children outside of the context of their community. And that includes their family. And also what partnerships are available out there. My kiddos are really interested in fishing. And I know that there are community partners because let's say we live close to lakes and we live close to different things like rivers. For example, in the DC area, there's the Anacostia River, and there's a potential partnership for this boating experience where kids can get to learn about fishing. And I could take a group of my kids to learn about fishing, or I can get partnership through this partnership or through learning about this organization, which is a free resource. An expert can come to my classroom and teach about fishing. Now, instead of simply looking at books about fishing, my kiddos can talk to actual fishing experts. Or what if one of my students have family members that are super experts in fishing too? I can reach out to family members and keep them engaged and use them, leverage their expertise as a resource to come talk about my fishing unit with my kiddos. All my texts are related to fishing. I have experts coming for fishing, and they get to experience hand-on experiences in fishing. So thinking about how we can leverage family and community partnerships would be essential to teaching the whole child and also adapting the way we teach for the needs of all our kids. Now, what exactly does this look like? Here are some strategies for teaching the whole child and some specific potential guidelines for creating inclusive and supporting learning environments. First, let's talk about cultivating a positive classroom culture. It's important to set clear expectation for our kids. What are you expected to do? So what's the activity? How are you expected to do it? How should your body move to do it? How should your voice level move to do it? And then how long do you have to do it? Okay, guys, we're going to take this much time to do XYZ. Now, you might have to adapt how much time some kids get because that's a part of providing an accommodation. That is fine. But set those clear expectations for kids when we tell them what they need to do. Also creating strong systems, routines, procedures. How do my kiddos enter their room? How do they operate around the room? How do they sit? How do they return materials to me, or do I return materials to them? How do they pack things up? What is the routine for dismissal? What is the procedure for if I don't know where something is? How do I tell my teacher? How do I gain access to a material? Thinking about the different systems, routines, making those visual for kiddos and explicitly explaining those things to them would definitely help in a more supportive learning environments, and also evaluating those routines yourself to ensure there's no gap in there. What if you create a procedure that's not supporting of one of your kiddos who may have some mobility issues. They might be wearing a brace for 10 weeks, or it might be a kiddo who's in a wheelchair. What if your procedures is not supportive of that? By creating those procedures, those routines, evaluating themselves based on the needs of your kids, you can fill in those gaps to make sure that all kids gain that inclusive support. Also promote a sense of safety, belonging, mutual respect among students. Believe it or not, students do not learn how to treat each other automatically. It's not something that, oh, developmentally, now I'm at the place where I know how to treat others. They actually see and model how we treat each other. And so the way we treat students is a model for how they could potentially treat others in the future. Also, the way they see family members treat each other could be a model for how they think they should treat other people. So being able to model safe and mutual respect amongst each other is important for fostering that inclusive and supportive learning environment. So when we see opportunities to leverage the behaviors that we are already seeing of promoting sense of safety, belonging. I love the way that this group of students include this student in doing something because they felt left out, promoting that, lifting that, elevating that. And also correcting behaviors that might not be supportive of everyone. We're not going to make fun of this student because they cannot hold their pencil correctly or correctly, right? Or they cannot hold their scissors. They haven't learned that yet. We're not going to refuse to talk to this student because they don't have as much language as us. So correcting those the behaviors that might be harmful to students with varied needs is also important, but it's even more important to elevate the positive behaviors that you do see that are promoting safety and belonging and mutual respect, because students can then model and replicate the behaviors they're already seeing. So it's better to be proactive than to be reactive. And then celebrate diversity and promote inclusive language in the way that we speak to each other. Do you have kiddos who are from Eritrea and Ethiopia? Do you have kiddos that are from different states, influx of students that came from different states? Do you have students with varied religious backgrounds? Think about how you can celebrate the differences and allow students to understand that differences is just another way for us to learn something new about each other. And how can you promote inclusive language that helps everyone feel included? So when we're talking about inclusive language, we're talking about language that does not separate us as us and other, me, other. We're in this together. All people's viewpoints are important. All people's backgrounds are important. And then how can you foster a growth mindset? This idea that we are constantly learning, that mistakes happen and you should not be afraid of them, that you can persevere, that you can try again, that it's important to try. How can we foster that growth mindset in our kiddos from such a young age? That will be important for cultivating a positive classroom culture. And then next, embrace universal design for learning. We have two under this category, UDL. It's important that we design instructional materials. So these are student-facing materials, the activities that students participate in, the assessments that we use to determine at what place in their academic journey a student is in. We need to make sure they're accessible for all kids. We need to make sure that they are able to engage all students. So that might be adapting instructional materials. I mentioned pictures before. It might mean including more pictures than words. It might be that you need to include language in all over the room in multiple languages so that all the kiddos can leverage what they already know in their home language to what they know in English. Maybe it looks like including activities that the students are more familiar with. Maybe students aren't familiar with certain words like sod. And so maybe I have to explain to kids what sod is and how that's related to grass. If it shows up in a story, I do a read aloud and sod is mentioned. I might have to pull that out and help them with that background knowledge. What if I live in an area where sod isn't something that's commonly talked about or even used because we don't really plant grass like that? Or what if you live in an area where you mostly experience, I forgot the name of the fake grass, but let's say something like that, you have to mention it explicitly to students. This is where we pull those out of the instructional materials so that all students have an understanding or that background knowledge that they need. And also assessments, you want to make sure the assessment is appropriate for the developmental needs of that student. And also that we're constantly assessing students based on where they are developmentally so that we can intervene as much as possible to provide those supports. Provide multiple means of representation, expression, and engagement. This has multiple meanings, which is funny, multiple means of representation. But let's talk about just math, for example. If we're talking about shapes, it would be nice if there are multiple ways that I can show students how to interact with shapes. Maybe I can show students shapes on a picture, two-dimensionally. But maybe I can also show students shapes in 3 dimension with blocks and tactile opportunities for them to interact with the shapes. Maybe I could show students ways that we could pull shapes apart and create new shapes, like breaking a rectangle apart to create triangles, for example. Providing them with multiple approaches to or representation of a concept of content will definitely improve or increase the amount of students that gain access to that content. Also think about text, or if I want students to learn about something, we're talking about the life cycle of a butterfly. I want students to understand life cycle. Maybe they actually interact with real butterflies. Maybe I take them on a field experience where they get to see butterflies in various parts of the life cycle. Maybe I get a way for them to sort an activity, and I just give them a bunch of different places of the life cycle, and they get to move their fingers around and push them in the right order. But this is another way, multiple ways for students to interact with the content, whether they're touching, whether they're going out and experiencing, whether they're reading about it in a book, they're experiencing a read aloud, or they themselves have to look at text and pictures. Multiple ways and multiple ways that we express things in learning, this will be super impactful for them in accessing different types of content. Differentiate instruction is our next one. So we should definitely offer varied instructional materials and assessments, which I kind of touched on before. But it's important that we adapt or modify our instructional strategies, the materials we create or that we receive, and the assessments also based on the needs of students. Adapt instruction to meet individual needs, interests, and readiness levels. Once again, thinking about meeting students where they are. This will also help students develop that self-efficacy that we're talking about, feeling a little bit more confident so that they can access the curriculum, access the content, access the activity. Provide scaffolding and support for students who require additional assistance. Sometimes there are students who need additional assistance outside of an IEP, and that is okay. Providing that scaffold could look different based on the need of the students. But once we've recognized that a student needs some additional, it could be repeating instructions. I might have to repeat instructions to a student who's a bit more distracted, and I have to do a little bit more check-ins than I have to with other students, and that is okay. Or maybe I have to create a visual chart that says, okay, red means I need a break. Green means I'm good to go. And they flip that card to tell you, like, it's just too much for me right now. I cannot continue to look at these words. I cannot continue to find all the words that start with A. It's too much for me right now. And you have that visual cue that they could provide you with, and they get a little timer for how long that break could be, and they go back to their activity. This could look different, but there might be students who need varied support physically, emotionally, language supports, going back to those domains. So consider that once we get to know our students. And then offer enrichment opportunities for students who need to be challenged. This, I feel, sometimes is not talked about enough. Support does not always mean scaffolding down, modifying down, or adapting rigor down. Sometimes it means that students need more to do. They need more challenging engagement opportunities or more challenging instructional or content that they have to interact with because they're a bit advanced for their age, their developmental expectations at that time. They're performing higher than what we would anticipate they would. It doesn't mean we just leave them be, oh no, they're good to go. They already know what they're doing. No, challenge those kiddos. For example, going back to my daughter, give her leveled readers higher than what she's doing. Give her opportunities to learn about comprehension. Give her opportunities to understand the structure of her story. That is totally fine. We always want students to know the needle should be moving. You should still be a continuous learner. It's the mindset shouldn't be, oh, I've learned everything for this grade or this age group, so I am tapped out. I'm good to go. No, we are always learning. And there is no set age that says you have to stop learning this now. That's it. Of course, we have to consider the development, all developmental domains. All of our kiddos aren't ready to go to the next thing because there's another domain to consider, like emotional regulation, right? They're not ready for this yet, although content-wise, they might be ready. Emotionally, they're not ready. Physically, they might not be ready. So we're still considering all of the domains in terms of challenging our students or providing enrichment opportunities. But yes, give students additional things that they can explore, learn about, inquire about if they are already at a stage that they are expected to be, or at they've gained the knowledge they've expected to gain. And then fostering collaborative learning. Let's encourage collaboration, cooperation, peer interaction among our kiddos. Let's get some group work in, some collaborative learning activities. Let's do some think pair shares, right? Some opportunities for them to do things together and work out problems together and brainstorm together. Let's promote a culture of shared responsibility. It's me and you in this together. We are both responsible for accomplishing this task, this goal, just like we as grown-ups have to do. And also a shared responsibility to provide support. These will help us create inclusive and supportive learning environments. This is also some other strategies promoting social emotional learning. So thinking about how those social emotional skills like self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, where will this show up in my teaching for my kids? Also provide students with time and opportunity to practice and apply these social emotional skills in real life context. So this can look like, how can I resolve a conflict with my peer? How can I show empathy in the way I listen to my peers and how they feel? It also could look like community service and giving back to the community. And then establishing strong relationships. So we want to build positive, supportive relationships with students based on trust, empathy, and mutual respect. And this includes their parents. You want to establish strong relationships with parents as well. You want to take the time to get to know each student as an individual. Maybe you do a survey or all about me poster. Maybe you try to figure out what their strengths, their interests, their needs, and their cultural backgrounds are. Learn a little bit about their family. What do they find? What do kids find important? And what do they find important about their family? Communicate openly and regularly with students and their families. This will be important to have that continuity between home and school that I mentioned before. Create a safe and inclusive physical environment. I can't stress this enough. Your classroom space should be accessible, welcoming. It should be conducive to learning for all students. It should consider whether or not students have sensory needs. Maybe you have to adapt your classroom space, but also you want it to be inviting and vibrant at the same time because these are young kiddos and you don't want it to be over stimulating, but you want it to be welcoming. You want your visual supports for kiddos around the room. You want your language supports around the room, and you want literacy rich environment. Let's see those texts showing up in the room. Also provide flexible seating options, sensory friendly accommodations, those visual supports to meet the diverse needs of learners. And then lastly, provide continuous professional development. I know I've said it and I'm going to continue to say it. Professional development is essential to providing or creating inclusive and supporting learning environments to provide the needs for all students to teach the whole child. So offer or seek out ongoing professional development and training for educators so you can enhance your knowledge, your skills, your competencies in inclusive practices, cultural responsiveness, trauma-informed care, and supporting diverse learners. Because you know what? This is not intuitive. This is a learned skill. And it might feel overwhelming at first, and I'm going to be the first person to acknowledge it if no one else has yet. It might feel like, oh my God, trying to adapt my instruction for all the kiddos in my room, that's a lot. However, it doesn't have to be. This is a muscle as an educator that you can continue to build and get strong, and it becomes a part of your nature, a part of your instruction, a part of your instructional practice. So, getting that professional development is important for that to happen. And then seek opportunities to collaborate with other educators because once again, you can't do it alone. Co-plan with other professionals, other ECE educators, leaders, share the best practices that you know and learn from one another. Go to someone else's classroom and see how they do the thing. See how they're able to do more hands-on activities. Maybe you need coaching. Maybe in your center, there needs to be a practice of coaching that includes coaching cycles. And that's a way to develop educators to be more professionally sound in teaching the whole child. And then also professional learning communities. Maybe you want to create a virtual space where you can engage. Let's say that you work in a ECE center that spans multiple cities, and you could create a virtual space where everyone across those various cities could communicate with each other, post about them awesome things that they're doing, engage in webinars about what they're learning. These are different ways to ensure that ECE professionals are constantly developing professionally to teach the whole child. So what? So let's think about these last two things. Let's start with Emma. This is a scenario about applying the whole child. So Emma is a 4-year-old student with autism spectrum disorder who struggles with social interactions and communication. She often becomes overwhelmed in noisy or crowded environments and has difficulty expressing her needs and emotions. So Emma's teacher wants to create a supportive and inclusive learning environment that meets her diverse needs and promotes her holistic development. So the teacher, these are some strategies below that the teacher can engage in, develop a visual schedule and social stories to help Emma understand classroom routines, expectations. She could implement, or he could implement, peer buddy or a peer mentor program that would facilitate social interactions and friendships with classmates. Maybe provide a quiet corner or sensory friendly space where Emma can go to calm down and regulate her emotion. Maybe collaborate with Emma's parents, therapists, and support staff to create a consistent and coordinated approach to supporting her social and emotional and academic goals. Maybe use argumentative and alternative communication systems or devices, or use such as picture card exchange or communication devices to support Emma's expressive and receptive communication skills. This oftentimes would probably be included in an IEP. So these are just some ways to think of the student's context. So far, we've thought about physical, emotional, we've thought about their community and systems of support here. We've thought about their social support needs. And these are some practical practices that could apply to Emma. And this is Javier, who's a 5-year-old student with Down syndrome who is transitioning into kindergarten. He has delays in speech and language development and requires additional support to participate in classroom activities and interact with peers. Javier's kindergarten teacher wants to create an inclusive and nurturing environment that supports his social, emotional, and cognitive development. Here are some supports below: peer relationships, social interactions through structured play, cooperative learning, inclusive group games. We could use some visual supports, gestures, and modeling to enhance Javier's understanding of concepts and instructions in the class. We could encourage the student to participate in classroom routines and activities at their own pace, celebrate their progress and achievements along the way. We could provide individualized support such as speech therapy, occupational therapy, early intervention services to address Javier's specific needs and promote communication and motor skill. This also could be within the context of an IEP once again. We could also collaborate with Javier's parents and therapists to develop a collaborative and coordinated approach to supporting development and inclusion. This was the last scenario, and super excited that I was able to talk to you guys about teaching the whole child.
What an amazing session this was, and we hope that you will each find another session to attend next. Have a great day.